Hi, everybody. Welcome to Hotchka's Critics Lounge, and we are here to discuss some very important movie anniversaries. This week, we're taking this on August 8th, 2020, and this week is the anniversary, the 70th anniversary of the classic Sunset Boulevard. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about another classic. Today, in fact, August 8th, is the 40th anniversary of the classic, the place where nobody dared to go, but we needed the world to know. It's Xanadu. And I have with me today our writers, Justin Moore and Colin Holmes, and we are here to discuss this film. Now, let's see, I know today was the very first time Justin saw the movie, so he's excited to talk about it. Colin has been a longtime fan. I was actually there on opening night, the day it opened, 40 years ago. So that's how old I am. So if you don't know about the movie, it's a crazy musical fantasy movie. Olivia Newton-John, Michael Beck, and Gene Kelly. And I don't know if you guys know, it started off as a very low-budget roller disco movie because at the time there was Roller Boogie and Skate Town USA that came out in 1979. So Universal wanted to cash in on the roller disco fad, which had a fiery demise in 1979, so they were really panicked when this movie was scheduled to come out in 1980. But then they added Olivia Newton-John got cast, and they're like, oh, okay, well, maybe we can boost this up. And then Gene Kelly got cast, and suddenly it became a $14 million movie that escalated to a $20 million movie. And then Andy Gibb was actually cast in the Sonny Malone role. And I think once the budget escalated, they needed somebody bigger. So they got Michael Beck, who was just coming off of The Warriors. So let me get Colin. First, let me ask you, just tell me how you feel about the movie in general.
Okay. I mean, I love the movie for what it is. And for me, same with theater. Like, I really love bad movies and like bad theater almost as much as I do good movies and good theater, especially when a movie is so devoted to trying to hit like certain boxes and you don't really know what those boxes are, but in the filmmaker's mind that's what they're trying to do. And I think that's Xanadu is a really good example of that, where it's like they're trying to create the star vehicle for Olivia Newton-John, who at that point was already pretty well known, especially because Grease was only maybe 2 or 3 years before. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but you know, Grease was still very much buzzworthy in the Hollywood community. And then to try to create a film that's like really featuring her as a solo artist, as a solo actor, is a good idea in concept. But, you know, when you're going back to this like roller derby kind of thing and then tying in the whole Greek goddess and creating this like very convoluted story, I think in a way it almost creates its own satire of a whimsical kind of storyline that they're trying to go with. And yeah, it's an enigma in and of itself. And, you know, I've shown this to a few friends in the past, and it's always like mixed reviews. Like, you know, if there isn't a drink in our hand, it's a bad review. If they're, you know, if we're, you know, a few back and sodas deep, it's absolutely wonderful. But it's just so all over the place where it's like, you really can't deeply analyze it, and if you do, you're going to find so many shortcomings that it almost becomes frustrating. But if you just look at it as like a fun spoof of a film, it's actually really wonderful and really to me it's on that list of things. It's like you just kind of need to watch it just to say you did, you know.
Well, the funny thing about the whole genesis of the film is that when they hired Olivia and the director Robert Greenwald, they only had a 40-page script. It wasn't even completed. And they both, you know, he was like, there's more, right? There's more. And Olivia Newton-John was like, well, I guess there's going to be more to it. So, yeah, the whole way it came together. I mean, and you can tell that it was kind of written on the fly. Just, you know, if you just watch the movie intently, like a lot of people have done, you know, when doing research on all this, you know, a lot of people have watched the movie intently, and you know, picking out all the little continuity errors just because, you know, they've had to go back and reshoot things, and you know, people, you know, one time Sonny is, when he's climbing into the auditorium for the first time, he doesn't have skates, and when he gets inside, suddenly he has roller skates around his neck. So there's all kinds of little continuity errors like this all through the movie that just tells you how much they really just shoot it on the fly.
Right. Well, and you can definitely tell, and there's so many scenes that you think are going to go somewhere, or like maybe that character is going to come back, or maybe there's something building here, and then you realize like, nope, it's just those 3 lines between these 2 actors you've never met and you will never meet again.
I just thought it was weird that Sonny, you know, when Xanadu finally opens at the end, only one of Sonny's coworkers even come to the opening.
Right.
The 2 women and his boss don't show up.
Well, not only that, like her sisters don't really come back. You know, like I think you could almost make a theme of them popping up as like different actors, different characters. Like there's the popcorn salesman in the park, or a saleswoman in the park, who's just, you know, there for one line and she gives them the popcorn. Like that could be one of the sisters, and it's not. And so it's like, it seems like it's very much unintentional in a lot of what they were doing, which I think in a way almost makes it more enjoyable.
Before we get into more in-depth, let's get Justin's, you know, first time virgin viewing of Xanadu, and then see how he thought about, you know, and it's pretty cool that you watched it on the 40th anniversary, just like nice night it opened.
Well, when you asked me if I wanted to discuss this film, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't know what this movie was. I never heard of it. Going back, I feel like I've seen the poster somewhere before, so. Watching it this morning, I kind of agree with what Colin said. The plot is just kind of like all over the place. It's very convoluted. It doesn't really make sense to me, but what kept me engaged in the film is the choreographed moments and the musical numbers and just all those fun, upbeat moments with Gene Kelly. I think at the end of the movie, I enjoyed watching it. It's definitely an odd movie in terms of its plot, but I did find the overall film to be enjoyable, and I feel like I could watch it again. How you two described it as kind of like a movie that you need to watch, and it's just a fun time if you could overlook the plot of the movie. And I can see what you guys mean about like a lot of shooting errors and everything, and just everything kind of seemed really quick, but there was a lot of effort going into a lot of the dance sequences, which I enjoy musicals, and I have for years. And so skipping this one, it's surprising to me, but I do like Gene Kelly in his final role, and just the whole movie was enjoyable despite that very odd setup for the movie and the errors throughout. I think it's a movie that I did enjoy.
Yeah. With Gene Kelly, you know, everybody says this was his final role, but it was his final theatrical film acting role, whereas he did a couple of TV miniseries after that, plus he hosted like segments in the 3 That's Entertainment films as well after that. So he was still around for a while. He just didn't do any more acting. Yeah. But I read that he took the role because his last film was in 1977. It was Viva Knievel, of all things. And he took this role because the shooting locations were close to where he lived. Yeah. So, hey, you know, if you can work to, you know, close to where you are, then why not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, commute's a big factor. So
I always get really, even though, you know, I've seen the film many times, it still like scares me a little bit when he puts on the roller skates and he's flying around Xanadu at the end with all the dancers and everything. It's like he's going really fast and he's going to break a hip or something. It's just like, I still like sit there and be like, yeah.
I don't think any film has said their title more than Xanadu, especially at the end, how they all they say was Xanadu.
Well, and not only that, the song shot to like #1 on the charts for like, I think it was like #1 for like 3 or 4 weeks. And,
the Xanadu song was #1 in the UK for 2 weeks. It was #1 in the rest of the world, but it never hit #1 in the US. But Magic did.
Magic. Okay.
The album was double platinum. So the album was much more successful than the film ever was.
The songs are really good. I really enjoyed the songs.
Yeah. Well, and I was reading too, they say Xanadu 21 times just in that song itself. And I'm like, that's not trying to plug your movie, then I don't know what is. But,
you mentioned the sisters. There's actually there's a couple of like funny, weird little cameos in the film. she's billed as sister number one, muse number one, was a dancer. Her name was Sandal Bergman, and she was in Conan the Barbarian. She played Valeria in Conan the Barbarian.
Okay.
And then was in the number with Olivia and Gene Kelly, Whenever You're Away From Me. In the background, far away in the back, you can see like the bandstand and the guy who's like young Danny McGuire playing the clarinet. Later on in the movie, you see him again as a dancer at Xanadu at the end. That's Matt Lattanzi, who she married 4 years later.
Wow.
And then the singer Brenda Lee, who rocking around the Christmas tree, she was on the Universal lot doing an episode of the Barbara Mandrell Show, and she is one of the dancers in the All Around the World number. I think I found a little screen grab, or I'm going to put it up so we can see, but I think I found a little screen grab. You just see the piece of her face, but she's even billed as a dancer. That's pretty funny.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, because I think the idea, and what you were saying before, it's like, this whole disco movement was like, really popular when this movie was conceived and when they were like writing and planning for it, and then 1980 hit, and all of a sudden it's completely irrelevant. So I almost feel like at the time it was like something that people probably wanted to be a part of, and even there are a few familiar names like Kenny Ortega, who did the choreography for it. He was pretty big at the time, and especially in the theatrical world. But after that, he went on to choreograph. I think he did Newsies. He did like Pretty in Pink, some of the John Hughes films of the 1980s.
He did Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson.
Yeah, he did so much at that time, and for him to come in and do the choreography and all that, it seems like the intention was really there that this was going to be this like summer sweep. And originally it was supposed to come out Christmas that year, and they pushed it back to an earlier time because they wanted to like make sure they weren't too far behind this like, disco craze. And that's something too that I find very interesting, especially in the number with Gene Kelly and Danny and Sonny, where they're in the auditorium that's constantly having different letters on the sign, but they're in there and they're kind of imagining what they want, and he wants to go like 1940s and the other one wants to go 1980s. Right. And it's funny because this is like I would assume this is probably filmed like 79 going into 1980, and their perception of what the 80s are going to be is like it's like this. It's like a lot of it is pretty on the nose, I think, but they added this like homosexual erotica flair of just like guys in their like revealing leotards and all of that, but just like ripped up and get kind of this like grungy nature. And then the end where you see what Xanadu has become, to me, it's like completely different than
I know. The end result was not what they were planning at all.
Right, and the end is great, but like the end to me is very much like 1970s roller derby again. It's like they finally achieved what was achieved a decade before. But anyway.
I think that was my favorite scene is when they were envisioning what they wanted Xanadu to be. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of that sequence, when they're kind of clashing together, I really enjoyed that scene. It was a pretty lengthy moment for just them envisioning what it would like to be. I think it could be something pretty quick, but they extended it, and I thought it was pretty impressive. And I liked those moments with Gene Kelly. But I was surprised to see Kenny Ortega because me being younger, I associate Kenny Ortega with some of the most recent Disney Channel original films that he works on.
Right.
And does the choreograph moments for those. So it was cool to see him choreograph this movie from 1980 when he's still working today.
Yeah. Right. And speaking of choreography, the number with Gene Kelly and Elvira and John, he said he was going to choreograph that number. So he had demanded a close set. It was him, Olivia, cameraman, two other people, I think. And he choreographed the whole thing himself. And that was the last scene that was shot for the film. And they say it's almost identical to another movie, the title dance number from Me and My Gal that he did with Judy Garland.
Right. Yeah, and you watch that scene, it's very much Gene Kelly.
Oh yeah.
It's very much his style, his movement. I think a lot of that kind of flashback, and even going into the scene, of course, the choreography is different. It's not the top number, but the scene where Olivia Newton-John and or Kira and Sonny are in the studio, and he's like lighting all these effects and all that. It was very reminiscent of "You Were Meant for Me" from "Singing in the Rain." And when I watched that this time, I was like, oh, looking in that scope, I was like, oh, that's actually kind of interesting. And then they bring in the umbrellas and the rain, and it's like this whole. This to me, it was very much like just kind of a little nod to him, and then kind of going back and looking at that choreography. It's like everything is very much Gene Kelly, but then they tie it into the scene where he's picking out his clothes, and they're in the department store, and they have all of these like funky like new age 80s dancers around them, and then you have Gene Kelly doing Gene Kelly. It felt like the only thing I could really relate it to is like the way I felt listening to Ethel Merman's disco album for the very first time. and I mean, I now have that on repeat for many years in my Spotify. But listening to it originally, where it's like, okay, like you have this one thing, and then it's you really just try to add in this other genre because you have these people to do it. And it for me, it very much works in that scene, especially when she's dressed in like her 1945 character, and then like coming into his memory, and then having that scene, and then have that be a juxtaposition to him kind of going into like this 1980s atmosphere, but still doing his very quick turn jazz hands Gene Kelly, and it's just it's always so enjoyable for me to watch. But
it's funny though they didn't include Olivia in the like the Battle of the Bands number. They had like the three like Andrews Sisters type singers there singing to Olivia Newton-John, who was harmonizing with herself. But it's like, well, why didn't they just put Olivia in there so she was kind of like Danny's muse too? I mean, she was muse. Obviously, she was there for him too.
Right.
But like, I wonder why they didn't put her in that number. And sometimes the women singing kind of forget to sing sometimes too.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that, and I thought about it more watching it this time, like her role in this whole thing, like, and I understand that she's supposed to be this muse, that she's there to like inspire them, but adding in her being a part of his history in 1945, and the scene where they're sitting at the table, and they're kind of talking, and he's talking about how she reminds him of this girl living here back in the 1940s, and she's kind of like nodding and winking to him that it's her. It created this idea for me, because actually I watched it with a friend of mine who had never seen it, because I really love watching things with people that have never seen it to like get their perspective. And he brought up the point that he was like, she's a muse, but she's also kind of this like man-eater in a way, where she's just coming in and dictating their lives and impacting them in such a way, knowing that she's doing that, and then just kind of pulling away and leaving, And I'd love to hear more what Justin thinks about that. Just looking from that perspective, like she's there, of course, to inspire, but she's also very seductive, and she, even just like the first time that Sonny and Kira meet, she just rolls right up to him, kisses him, and rolls away. And then the second time they kiss, he goes in for it, and she asks him not to. And it's like, clearly it's this like, to me, it's very much this like power struggle between the two. And for me, it kind of creates this idea that she's also there kind of for her own fun, her own enjoyment.
Yeah.
And we don't explore that as much.
Yeah, I could understand that. And that first scene that we're introduced to them two together, I was a little bit taken back. I was a bit shocked that, their relationship was like already established with just that moment, not setting up, them meeting more personally and, get an understanding of who they were, but instead she just went up to him and kissed him, and it was a bit like, okay, that was a bit confusing to me, but I could see what you mean. Like, she was there to inspire him, and they definitely had those moments of where she was, giving advice and being an inspiration to him, but also kind of like this was for her to kind of enjoy herself and, explore, the world and everything. But it kind of was like up and down at times, but I think Olivia Newton-John was good in the movie with whatever part she was playing.
Right, whatever like it just made me
Whatever
think
character.
you know, and like there's the part where she tells him that she's this, you know, this muse, this Greek goddess, and she goes to say her name, and I forget the name of the Greek goddess that she's.
Terp. She says Terp.
Yeah.
Terpsichore. I don't know how to pronounce it, but
Yeah.
the goddess, the muse of dance is who she's supposed to be.
Right, and going back to what you were saying before, it's like, you know, she's the muse of dance, but she's actually not really featured in any dance numbers other than Gene Kelly, and then she has a little bit during like the whole dressing room montage that they do, and then
Well, she does a little bit at the end too during the Xanadu number with her sisters.
right,
She does a little country hoedown thing.
so random. That to me is like that just felt like the very end when they're trying to like bring in all of these like different Americana genres that she's like taking over, and they do like a little bit of Broadway, they do some jazz, and they do this like country. That to me was very much the moment I remember thinking the first time. I was like, oh, this is just a very long music video or living room. Like that's all this is. But it's just that campiness that I think they weren't intending to go for, and then they did, and it just worked really well.
That's what I think overall, how I feel about the movie is it's random. I feel like they had one idea when they initially wanted to start the film, and then they bring in, Gene Kelly and other people, and they all kind of had different ideas and mixing different genres and different dancing styles, because Gene Kelly is Gene Kelly and his dancing style is unique, and it fits. It's odd with the movie, and just a lot of it feels random, and the music, but the story feels random too. But I think that they try to do a little bit too much and makes the story feel convoluted.
Well, I think that goes back a little bit to the whole thing of not having a script written, because there is a going back to the whole thing with the muses, there is a major plot point from the beginning of the movie that they cut that's actually used in the Broadway musical version. But when she first rolls up to him and kisses him, that's kind of like a take on that saying "kissed by a muse." So that's like, she's kind of like ordaining him that she's the next subject. But in the original script, and there's like one line that he kind of alludes to it, but in the original script, it was very explicit that he's the one who painted that mural of the muses at the beginning of that see where they all come to life. Mm-hmm. So with that knowledge that he actually painted that, then it kind of makes more sense that the muses chose him to help. But without that, it's just kind of random.
Right.
And that whole mural painting is very bizarre too, because when you see it, nobody has any real features. It's kind of abstract. You can see figures and things, and then while all the muses are leaping out of it and coming to life, they show Kira, and she's like fully photorealistically painted. And then later when he goes to the mural again and like skates into the wall, it's back to the whole kind of abstract look. So I was like, okay, that was weird, but so yeah, that's the actual story, was that he painted the mural, so that's why the muses chose him to help build Xanadu.
Why would they cut that? It's a 96-minute movie. Like, why would they cut that? Like that's what blows my mind, because that to me, and just hearing you say that, I'm like, okay, well that makes 10 points that I had today makes sense, and I don't need to bring this up anymore. Because the big thing was that he writes this letter about like his dreams and aspirations and wanting to leave his job and wanting not to freelance in the art world anymore, and rips it up and then just throws it out the window. And then they add in the animation of the paper like meeting the mural, and all of a sudden they're alive. And then they do this like very awkward like 4-minute jazz ballet number. That's like, you're just like, great. And that's the end? Nope, that's not the end. Okay, we're gonna keep, we're still dancing. And like that's just keeps going and going, and it's like it's this grandiose moment. And for a while I was like, all right, we probably could have cut this down in half, but like the idea that he created these things and now they're coming out of the wall and now they're coming into his life, like that makes a lot more sense as to a lot of the structure of the film. And
I think he says something at one point when he's like, having a moment at work, is like, I'm tired of painting people's, I painted his car, I painted their wall, I did that. So that's like the one reference that's still there about the mural. So
right. That's so interesting. That's good to know. Well, and also, I mean, he has this kind of like because she swoops in for the kiss and he's like taking it back, but like I did always kind of get this feeling that there was like a sense of familiarity, and especially when he goes back and sees like the record cover with like the auditorium again, the mixed letters. It's like this level of familiarity. He's like, oh well, that's that girl that kissed me in the park, but like it would create so much more depth of it. It's like this is this girl that he drew, that he painted.
It would have been even more, I think, more interesting because he gets the record cover with her on it. He's like, wait, this is the same girl I painted on the mural, So,
right.
and then he keeps moving. He's like, wait, why do I? So it would have been even more, I think, cohesive if there was all those connections rather than just here's a record for you to because then it's just some random girl whose picture was taken on, at Venice Beach.
Right. Well, and then that would also, in a way, tie in the entire animation sequence that they did after the fact. And from what I was reading up on it, and correct me if you know a little bit more about it, but from what I understand, like they added that in because they had like an extra song that they wanted to put in, and they wanted to create a little bit more of a bond between them. So instead of making them all come back and building a set and doing all that and making them film, they just created this animation sequence because it was cheaper. Is that right?
That's right. Yep. And that was done by Don Bluth, who had done The Secret of Nim and The Land Before Time. And then he actually kind of lifted some of the sequences with the rose for another movie he did later called Anastasia.
Yeah, it feels like it doesn't fit in, but then when you look at the entire scope of the movie, you're like, well, nothing really fits in.
All random.
Yeah. And that's honestly, that's one of my favorite parts, because it's just like, it seems like they had an intention. You don't really know what it is, but if he created her as a drawing and now he's creating this world around her, then like, wow, like let's go into, movie theory and let's really get deeper into this, because it seems like it actually makes sense.
I like the animation because it did remind me of those movies that you talked about.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of like those 80s, 90s, like non-Disney animated films.
Yeah, that you think are Disney movies.
Right, yeah, that you just like automatically assume. And then BuzzFeed comes saying like, these 10 movies are actually not Disney at all, and everyone's like shocked and blown away by it.
Yeah, Stage is probably the one movie that people think is Disney.
Mm-hmm. This is one of the things I think over the years that I've been harsh about watching the film is Michael Beck's performance, and knowing now that there was like no script when they started, I kind of can be a little easier on him, but it's kind of weird now to imagine that Andy Gibb was originally cast, but they didn't, it would have been his first acting role, so Universal wasn't going to do that with this big budget movie now. John Travolta was considered, but he was doing Urban Cowboy at the time. Michael Biehn was considered 4 years before The Terminator. He did The Fan the next year, which is my favorite like slasher films with Lauren Bacall. And David Naughton, the I'm a Pepper guy, he was considered, but he was making a movie at the time too. And Griffin Dunne was also considered, and both of those went on the next year to be in An American Werewolf in London. So it's kind of funny how all these people have been considered, and then they went on to other things, and some of them for Universal. But it would have been, I think, a different movie with any of those people. Because I think, Michael Beck, he didn't even have to audition, because after Olivia and Gene Kelly were cast, it was kind of like, well, we need like a big name now for the Sonny role. And so he was coming off of The Warriors, and he didn't even have to audition for the role. And he said at one point, the Warriors opened a lot of doors for him, and then Xanadu promptly shut them.
I could definitely see that.
And
it's funny, the script, of course, isn't developed very well, but I mean, there are certain things that, like, even some of the best actors, I don't think could really get away with creating convincing performances. And I don't know if it was a choice or not, but there are times where I notice that his inflections are just a little off, and they're very much in the style of like a nod into like intentional camp, which I think is what that script needed and what that script is. But like the big part that sticks out for me is when he's walking by and he asks the older gentleman if he's like seen this girl, and he's like, oh no, but hey, you're single, right? Here are my daughters, and just like pulls out it's completely an unrealistic thing. And I kind of noticed from there that it just continued to be this like none of it's conversational by any means, and a lot of it's very much thrown in there. And I think something that I thought was very interesting what he did was he kind of altered his inflection so that way everything he was saying, like, he would raise his tone at the end. And so it just kind of like created this whole idea of like, I'm in on the joke too, for me. And you know what I mean? Like, he wasn't going for an Oscar. He knew he wasn't going for an Oscar, and just went with it.
I think another interesting thing is Gene Kelly's character, Danny McGuire. He played the same character in a movie from 1944, I think. I think CoverGirl, I think it is. And he plays a nightclub owner named Danny McGuire in that film. So they kind of say it's like, this is one of the weirdest crossover or sequel characters that's ever been done in a movie. But what's really interesting is Xanadu is actually based on the film Down to Earth with Rita Hayworth, and that actually was a sequel to Here Comes Mr. Jordan, which was remade as Heaven Can Wait. So it's like a lot of this movie is tied into other things, which is kind of interesting. But I think the whole Danny McGuire thing is really kind of a interesting thing. I don't know. I assume it was intentional, but nobody's ever said if it was or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that would be an interesting hill to die on if that's like what they're trying to do and what they're trying to get away with, and especially because it might be a nod to it, but there really is no further connection.
It can be part of a Xanadu universe.
Right. Xanadu is actually part of the MCU, and built into it. She shows up at the end of Endgame. It's great.
They should go back and digitally put Olivia Newton-John into scenes in CoverGirl just to tie them together.
To really make the continuity flow. Yeah, that's fine.
And then it would all make perfect sense.
Right. So you were saying before that that they did like a close set for his dance number with Olivia Newton-John, where they're going back to 1945. And so were they like completely done with filming and they decided to put that in after, or was that kind of always an intentional thing that they were looking to do? Do you know?
Well, I know it was the last thing they shot, so it was probably because at that point he said that he wanted to choreograph that number. So I guess they probably saved it for the end, because at that point they probably did. They probably shot his scenes earlier when the place is like fully furnished and everything, because when they're dancing together, it's all empty. So at that point, they could have just cleaned out that entire set and just made it that big empty room that they danced in. Because then it fades back into him in the room where he was when he started. So they probably just like, okay, we're done shooting, clean out this room, we're going to do the dance number, and that's a wrap.
Right. Well, and that's my question too. So they. With that scene, and I think a lot of this comes back to what I was talking about before, like whether she's kind of this like man-eater with like her own agenda, and if she's like really a manipulative person or is just trying to inspire them both to greatness in their own way. Because she is in the memory and then kind of like comes in and is now in the room with him as part of his memory. And then part of it is like, you could look at it that way, or is she actually in the room kind of like dragging his memory about this again to like motivate him to being a part of what becomes Xanadu? And I was curious what you guys think about that. Whether like she was actually there and was like intending that, or if it's just like getting his own memory and dancing by himself in the middle of a room.
I think it's on his head just because of the way the scene fades to the big empty room with nothing there. But what, like you're saying about muses, they always like to toy with the human. The gods always toyed with the humans anyway. So she could be toying with him, but I think he's remembering her more than her actually being there at that point, because she was like his love back in 1940s, and then she just disappeared out of his life at that point too. So for me, I think it's just on his head. What do you think, Justin?
I think it's like he's remembering it, and like it's him enjoying the moment of, because she was there to like be an inspiration. So like she's not there, but he's envisioning like what it would be like if she was there, kind of to like lift the spirits, I don't know, of the place.
Because I mean, yeah, he's got that album, and her picture's in the album too, so it's obviously
right.
her.
Because a lot of my thought of it too is like, when you look at this from a little bit more of a realistic standpoint, him as a freelance artist, you know, he has a line where he says like he doesn't make money doing this, and he doesn't want to do this. This isn't what he like set out to do. He wouldn't. It's my perception that in LA in the late 70s, like he wouldn't have the money to just buy this auditorium and open up, you know, this roller rink. So to me, like the funds are coming from Gene Kelly's character.
Oh yeah.
And so he's kind of needed as a pawn in this. And when looking at it that way, I was kind of thinking like, well, did she really kind of like fool them both in a way to get to this point? And not back to like 1945, but just like identified him as someone that she could go back to and bring into this to make sure all of this happens.
Well, that goes back again, if they had left that whole plot point in about him painting her in the mural, then it would have made it all the more sense.
It would have made so much more sense.
That's why she was putting them together. Because I mean, obviously, Danny McGuire was the one who paid for the whole thing, because at one he says, "Hey, I'm going to make you my partner. You're 50%, so you get 50% of the responsibility." But it's like, you didn't have to pay any of the costs. So, Sonny's making it really, really well in this deal.
Right. Yeah. And that's part of it too. Like, there's no real connection between Sonny's dreams and opening up a roller skating rink, which I think is interesting. All they needed was one line where he was like, "Man, you know what? I really want to open up a roller skating rink," and that would fill like most of the plot holes for me. He never had that moment where like, this is my dream. Like, if anything, his dream to me was to be an artist and be able to survive in doing what he loved to do. And in the end, that he's not really doing that at all. And if they, maybe added in a line like that, where when he's like painting the mural and, it would just kind of all come together in a way. But again, like
his connection to music was very tenuous, just because he painted album covers. All of a sudden he wants to open up a nightclub.
Yeah,
I think they could have had a deeper connection because if I'm correct, the first time when she kisses him, she's roller skating, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right.
So, maybe if they got digged a little deeper into that he wanted to create a roller skating rink because of how they met, and like it meant something to him. That would have been interesting.
They do skate a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it has a meaning to him.
Yeah. Right. And like it clearly has a meaning to her.
Yeah.
You don't know what that meaning is, but you know that she really likes to do it because she's doing it for most of the movie. But she's always the one instigating that, and that's like, to me, again, going back to that power where it's like, well, does she wants the roller skating rink, right? Like, does he want it? To me, it doesn't seem like he really does, until all of a sudden it's like, hey, wouldn't this make a really great roller skating rink? And he's like, yeah, I'm sure this would be great for a roller skating rink. Like, it could also be a great movie theater. It could also be, you know what I mean? It could be a great concert venue. It could be a great anything. But she's very much prodding him to get into like roller skating, which I think is just kind of interesting. And especially because they didn't even tie roller skating into that like 45-minute long ballet sequence that they have when they first come out of the mural. It's not really 45 minutes for anyone who hasn't seen it. It's not really 45 minutes. It's just a very, very long.
It's long.
They had a song to fill the time.
Yeah, right.
It's funny, Jeff Lynne from Electric Light Orchestra, he said that he's never seen the film, and after he read the reviews, he probably never will see it, but he's proud of the music.
And it has every right to be. I mean, some of the songs in this movie are like staples for Olivia Newton-John, which I think should be, enough of a redeeming quality.
They're very
And enough
catchy.
to inspire a Broadway musical. Yeah.
Yep. Well, that's what Michael Beck said too. When he said that Xanadu closed all the doors. He said, but hey, any movie that inspires a Broadway musical can't be all bad, right?
Right. Exactly. Even though the musical itself is very much a satire of the movie.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know, it really identifies that camp and how bad it is. Goes with it, which is I love. But,
Yeah, I hope there was supposed to be a tour. It was supposed to start in September, and it was going to come to town here, and for some reason it got postponed, and then everything else happened in the world. So hopefully they'll get back on track. But so I guess well, we've been doing this for a while, so we should start wrapping this up. So let me get Colin. Let me get some final words from you about the movie, and then we'll get Justin.
Sure. So I mean, as far as the film, it's not great. There's no moment where you're like, wow, this is cinema gold. This is a classic. But much like a lot of those campy movies, and especially things like that came out around that time, like Mommy Dearest, and you have Rocky Horror and a lot of those things where it's like you find so much value in the lack and like what is lacking and what it needs to work on. For that alone, I love it. I think it's so fun. And the music's catchy. The plot is there, kind of. and that's honestly, that's enough for me for like, a rainy Saturday afternoon.
Justin?
Like this movie is just thrown together. There's a lot of errors, a lot of things wrong with it. Like I said in the beginning, it's a movie that I overall did enjoy for a first experience, not knowing the movie and watching a lot of musicals throughout the year. This one just didn't catch my attention years ago. So, was it that popular or was it not well received? But I enjoyed Gene Kelly and Olivia Newton-John, and the musical numbers I did enjoy. I found the music to be catchy. There was I watched it with my daughter this morning. She was just kind of there, but the one scene where they were envisioning what the venue would look like, and she was like dancing along. She was enjoying the moment. So, for the musical numbers, I did enjoy that. But for a plot, there's just so much wrong with it, and it's just all thrown together. But I'm not disappointed that I watched the movie or regret watching it. Would I watch it again? I'm not too sure. Like you said,
you can't escape it.
Like Colin said, like a rainy Saturday kind of movie. If you were watching, like, hey, let's watch a bunch of bad musicals, Xanadu would be in there.
Right.
For me, like I said, I was there opening night, so I've had the longest connection to the movie. But of course, it's always great to see Gene Kelly. Thing, and knowing this was his last acting role on film, like that is pretty special. And I think he's probably, one of the stronger performances in the film, just because he's a veteran and he knows what he's doing. And his dance number certainly is Gene Kelly. You can tell from there he stands up and takes that pose, the arch back and straight up pose is like, that's a Gene Kelly move. But as much as I have ragged on Michael Beck over the years, he's okay. When I watched it again this week, I thought he wasn't bad. But I think for me, it's just like Olivia Newton-John is just what makes the movie worth watching. I think she's just so I don't know, she's just like so pure and sweet, and even though her intentions may be a little shady, I even still, that when she's singing Xanadu at Dan, I still get like a little tear, man, just because her voice is just so pure, and she hits those high notes, and so she really makes the movie worth watching for me. And the special effects, when I first saw it, like, the special effects are like really cool too. It's kind of cheesy now. They were inspired by the producers liked the opening titles from Superman the movie, so they wanted the same company that did that to do the special effects. So that's how the special effects came about. But it's not a great movie. It's not a good movie, but it's got great music. It's got Gene and Olivia and just some crazy stuff that I see new stuff every time. I see new stuff that I probably shouldn't see every time I watch it, with the mistakes and things. But it's fun. And every now and then I just like to sit down and watch it. And I've got the soundtrack kind of like in my head all the time. So all this week it's been I've had the soundtrack. Well, I want to thank you guys for taking some time out to do this today. This is our first time doing it, and hopefully we'll get to do some more in the future. I'm going to look through some more movies that have anniversaries through the rest of the year and see what else we can do. So hopefully everybody out there who's watching like this, and if you do, subscribe to our YouTube channel and be sure to follow Hotchka.com and all of our social media pages. And we hope we'll see you again soon. Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you later.